Somebody asked on here, how do you check if your patient can cough or gag? Being an ICU nurse, these are things that I assess for every time I am doing one of my assessments because these are some of your basic reflexes that the majority of patients should be able to exhibit. And if they don't exhibit them, then we need to take a further look into why. For my patients that are intubated, in order to make them cough, I will use the ET tube suction to thread the catheter down. And once the end of the suction catheter hits their carina, the majority of patients should cough. Some reasons they may not cough is if they are way too heavily sedated, if they are on a paralytic, or if they have some sort of underlying brain disruption or neurological condition going on that impacts them coughing. In my non-intubated patients, I can usually just say, hey, can you cough for me? And if maybe they're not following commands to cough, you can use a yonker or yankower or whatever you want to call this thing. If you want to have a fun time debating, you can go to the comments and debate how you say the pronunciation of this thing. But you can use a yonker to do both a cough reflex and a gag reflex. I'll use this to kind of go to the back of my patient's throat and kind of, initiate their gag reflex. I also like it because I have suction on, so in case like there's anything back there, I can kind of get it out. But this should really make a patient cough too if you're like putting it back there. Some patients don't have great gag reflexes. Sometimes that reflex has just gotten weaker over time. Sometimes it's a neurological condition. And your patients that are intubated, it can be kind of hard to stimulate a gag reflex, especially if they're sedated. You'll notice in the patients that like are being weaned off of sedation and waking up on a ventilator, a lot of times they'll be kind of already gagging and choking and coughing on their breathing tube. And that's because it's irritating in the back of their throat. It's a natural reflex for them to have. But regardless, you can still try to check for a gag reflex by using a yonker, and sometimes you'll get it in your intubated patients and sometimes you won't. And that's how I check for a cough and gag in my ICU patients. Let me know if you have any questions.